Are you kidding me? I'm like 90% ramble. You think this is all fucking scripted? I have like a list of words that I have to make sure I say. It's just a list of single words. The rest is filler.
Well, at least we're smart, so when we ramble, it's interesting.
Welcome back to Get Good Talks, where few good gamers think outside of the box. My name's Delapo, and today we are joined by Rachael from Persephonics yet again.
Hello, my friend. So happy to be here.
How are you doing, Rachael?
I'm doing beautifully, thank you. How about you?
I'm fantastic. You play anything good lately?
I feel like I should say yes, given that I have a gaming channel, but no, I've been a bit preoccupied at the moment. I'm a disappointment.
Only slightly. Only slightly.
Moderately, just a moderate disappointment.
Well, I mean, you played Brawlhalla with us a little bit ago. That
I
was fun.
would not call that a good game. It was an entertaining game.
Ooh.
Well, I'm
Just
bad at
throwing
it.
some
And
shade.
also, you had some problems with your controls being swapped and all.
Oh man, well, if you don't know, on here on Get Good Talks, we like to talk about some events in gaming, give our perspective on them, and effectively open up the channel so that you can discuss with us your opinions as well. So today we are talking about indies. What
Beautiful,
are they?
my
Right?
favorite.
What are indies? I hear some shocking things out of video game YouTubers sometimes. Some say that Mario Kart Double Dash only deserved a 7 out of 10. Some say that PC gaming is the only way to game, and some even say that indie games just aren't worth their time. As an avid gamer, I think that sometimes gaming should just be gaming. I mean, what? Come on. Games provide these wonderful experiences that other mediums just can't provide. That's why I advocate for all forms of gaming. Whether you game on your phone, your tablet, console, PC, or VR headset, just game. So when I hear that a person won't give an entire form of gaming a simple look just because it isn't AAA, it really bothers me. I can't help but think that it may reside in the fact that indie games have a reputation for being of a particular style. On top of that, the way the technology is evolving more and more, indie developers are able to get more and more out of their games. So the definition of indie games has evolved and become a bit more muddy. What do you think, Rachael?
I Indie it's a unique market in that it's so open for creativity, and I think that we're consuming it ravenously and dramatically undervaluing it as a source of content, which is tragic. It's a beautiful, beautiful realm for things that we're never going to get in mainstream economies ever.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
I know that with indie games, it become the definition is probably the muddiest part of it. The idea that I'd say like a few years ago, everybody knew what an indie game was. Like for
Mm-hmm.
fact, like you knew through the art style, you knew through the production value, everything like that. Like genuinely, an indie game was a game that did not have a publisher behind it. That was it. And the reason why we saw
Yeah.
like things like pixel art and styles like that was the fact that it was a budget constraint. They didn't have the huge, AAA budgets to put around like 3D polygonal graphics and things like that. And now, like because of open source, like middleware, things like Unreal Engine, and Unity, indie developers are able to make varied types of gaming. And I think the customer base has realized that, and they're not letting aesthetics really fool them anymore. But every once in a while, there's that person who thinks that indie games are just that like any NES SNES style pixel art game,
Mhm.
and I think part of it might have to be, I guess, I want to say like better marketing, but that's not necessarily what it would have to be. I don't know how we would clear that up. Like, what is an indie today? What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just realized that's what you were asking me initially, and I completely spaced on the question itself. I mean, I think that answer is not entirely, but it's greatly individual. And for me personally, indies are still and always will be the games or the content, whether that's in any medium you can choose, that are outside of the established brands. I think that's the easiest way to clear it up. It's independent creators, obviously, working without the backing and the funding of established brands and without the marketing and the tools. And unfortunately, and this is what I meant when I said this earlier, it's a very popular medium, and it's full of creativity. And unlike the established brands, it does not have the respect that it deserves, I think.
I
completely didn't answer your question the first time.
You're fine. This is an open platform. We like to have fun here. Okay, there's no rules except the rules.
Okay. There are rules. I'm so bad at rules.
So, I think a lot of confusion can come from the price point of a lot of indie games. There was an article I read recently talking about how indie games are entirely too inexpensive. And
oh yeah,
I read it and I was like, you know, like at first glance I was like, what the fuck, come on, what are you talking about? How are you going to tell someone that this indie game or whatever, this game developed by who the hell knows, deserves, you know, $50 to $60, anywhere in that price range? How are you going to tell me they don't deserve more than $20? You know, reputation, things like that are often things that you have to earn. For like just a blanket example here, you know, Apple. If Apple was like a brand new company today that was just like, fuck you, here's a phone that's $800, you know, like, like
yeah,
like, who the hell are you? You don't earn this. You know, and so I guess there must be this mentality behind the indie developers too that are like, okay, well, that's the same thing. We can't do that. We can't say, oh, we'll charge, you know, $50 for a game because they don't know who we are. But at the same time, there's this game. I think it's like it's almost like 500,000 copies on Steam alone. The Witness, very very popular indie puzzler, and it was $40. So, absolutely. You know, I mean, I am not afraid to say that I'm wrong, but like at the same time, like it's a matter of convincing the masses. I don't want to believe that, like, oh, this one game's runaway success means that indies can start charging whatever they want. Just, like, if you think about it, like, what's the most prolific and amazing game you've ever played? Okay? Yeah. Would you pay $10 more for that? Absolutely. I can say that wholeheartedly. Yeah, of course. The best game I've ever played was $60. I'd definitely pay $70 for it. So it's like, it's not... It's the experience that you're selling. It's not... just a namesake, and I get that now, and I'm getting it more and more. It's just I don't think it's a move that they're ready to make yet.
Absolutely. And I mean, I am actually in the camp that many indie developers should charge more, for a few reasons. And one of the primary reasons is that it's fucking expensive to develop an indie game. Completely expensive. And I mean, it's always going to be hard for small creators to make ends meet. That is just the reality of being a non-established creator. That's the reality of it. But I mean, in every other medium, we've always had indies, whether it's comics, we have self-published novels, we have independent films, and they're still charging generally the same price in the market. So I do think that indie games should generally come with a heftier price tag. That said, I think there needs to be an honest discussion about quality, because you mentioned The Witness, and that's a good game. It's a really good game, and it sold a lot, and people liked it, and I've played it. It's a wonderful game, but it deserved the price tag. A lot of work went into that game, and there's a lot of indie games that I think are someone's first attempt, or maybe a lazy attempt, or just something that wasn't well executed. And no, that's not going to pull in the same price tag. You have to, especially as an indie creator, you have to justify the cost of your game.
Very true. And I remember there was this game that came to Switch. It was Cave Story. Now, keep in mind that the game was several years old at the time, and come out on like a bunch of other platforms before. I say this without, like, no one's paying me to say this or anything like that. Like, the fact of the matter is that Cave Story is one of the best experiences I've ever had out of a game, period. Be it indie game, platformer, like third-person shooter, whatever, doesn't matter. That was one of the best games I've ever played. And they, like, this game that was years old, they put it on the marketplace. I think it was $30 at launch.
Hmm.
for this 2D sprite, little platformer shooter game. And, like, I just remember I was like, oh man, I'm surprised they didn't charge more for this. But at the same time, how the hell are you going to convince other people to charge, like, to pay $30 for this? Like, I love the
Yeah,
game.
of
I
course.
understand why they're charging this, but, like, it was so hard to look at and, like, so hard to explain. But you know what? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's selling pretty well. So you know what? That's awesome for them. I'm so glad that that's happening. And then we see these other, like, these breakaway hits with indie games, and like Shovel Knight. That's a very another popular game
yeah.
there. And Rocket League. Oh my god, how popular Rocket League is. I hate the idea of indie developers being painted into a corner, or being, like, feeling forced to keep their content behind a certain, like, that $20 like limit behind it. And then there was I remember there was this indie game that decided that it was going to charge $60.
Ooh, was it worth it?
It hasn't come out yet. Yeah, or actually, I think it has. I think it was recently. But the points. It's, I mean, people lost their shit over it. But at the same, I feel like it was a necessary step for an indie developer to take.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, there's also, like, that cloud of indie game, or I should put that in quotes, like air quotes, indie game that partway through its advertising and things like that acquires a publisher.
Yeah.
Like No Man's Sky, for instance. I think Sony was the one who, like, started advertising and things like that for it, and then publishing for it partway through. And my goodness. So that, I mean, I can only imagine that it was, like, talks with, like, the Sony board and things like that. They were like, we should probably charge $60 for this, because I can't imagine that game is ever going to be $60 before Sony.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it's the definition gets more and more muddied every single time something like this happens. And then recently I was trying to talk to this developer on Twitter about something. They've been using, like, because every once in a while I look up indie devs or indie games or whatever on Twitter, and this game that was coming out, they've been hashtagging indie dev, indie game, everything like that. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And it looked really cool, only to find out that Square Enix was publishing the game, and I was like, wait, like, what? Like, that's so weird. That was really weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all of that in mind, when it comes to, like, price point, publishing, and things like that, how exactly are we supposed to judge these games? Like, as far as, like, critically, how are we supposed to look at them? How are we supposed to judge them, like, apart from their counterparts? Things like indie games without publishers, or AAA games, etc.
I mean, you're looking, how do we judge the specific qualities that make the game? Is that what
Like,
you're asking me?
the quality of the game, exactly. Like, critically, how do we give because Steven and I were talking about it, and we came to the conclusion that if you're going to charge $60 for a game, if you're going to charge any price for a game, okay, not only does it have to be, a good game and standard things like gameplay, story, etc., but you have to make the person who bought the game feel like it was $60, or feel like it was $30 at least, if not more. Star Wars Battlefront 1 is a great example of a game that was full price that did not feel like it should have been full price. And so we judge the games like that. Like, for instance, if Star Wars, like, it was missing, like, a bunch of features. So if the game had been, like, I don't know, $30 at launch, it would have been received so much better, because we have this thing in our minds where it's like, okay, it's a $30 game. I'm not expecting $60 worth of content or anything like that behind it. Not to mention the game didn't have a story mode. It was, like, strictly multiplayer, and it was this whole mess of, like, lack of features that they said they were going to include that they didn't. They locked it behind a paywall. And so so, like, let's say an indie game comes out tomorrow and they want to charge $60. is it fair for us as, video gamers, game journalists, game critics, to review that game or to look at that game with the standards that we set for other $60 games? Or, like, how would we go about critiquing
I mean, I think that we have to have, even if we're paying the exact same price, I think there is a necessary division between the established brands and the indie titles. You buy an indie title with the awareness that they can be absolutely extraordinary, but they're still at a slight disadvantage when it comes to certain tools. It's a bit like reading I read a lot of comics. I love graphic novels and comics, and the established companies are wonderful, consistently wonderful, with a few notable flops. We're not going to fucking talk about Red Hulk. And but you pick up an indie comic expecting good narrative, good art, but understanding that they're still denied a lot of the resources that the bigger brands and the bigger names are. And I think that's important to translate to games. Yes, you should get your money's worth with any game. And I think for most of us, not all of us certainly, but most of us, what we're looking for in games is good game mechanics and narrative. And I think most of us can let a lot of things slide if we have those two things in play. So at least for me, I think it's important to, yes, get your money's worth, but also understand that you're supporting an independent creator that doesn't have the tools the AAA titles would, and judge accordingly. At least to me. We're ravenous content consumers, and we have to fund the creators we want to see more of, and that's worth the price, even if there's a slight difference in quality between indie and AAA.
So, overall, do you believe that indies, what would you say to someone who says that indies aren't worth their time?
I tell them to explore more indies, because yes, there are a lot of games. What I meant when I said we need to have an honest conversation about quality. Not every indie game deserves to be $30 or $60. Of course not. So having an honest conversation about quality, explore more indies, because there are really, really wonderful games out there that aren't getting the traction they deserve because they're labeled as an indie. We pay attention to really grand really grand success, and normalize it, and pretty much dismiss everything that doesn't fall into that category, which is the majority of games. And there's a lot of really, really wonderful, well put together, beautifully designed, beautifully written games that people just aren't aware of, and they deserve attention, and they deserve the funds to create more.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of all of that, there really are indies for all styles of games. If you like racers, there are indies for that. If you like shooters, there's indies for that. They're not all platformers, I promise. And
They're not.
they've acquired this I guess I want to say like gaming stereotype behind it, and it really it's expanded so much. We've got games like Ukulele, and while you say whatever you want about the quality of that game, you can see like how beautiful that game is, how grand that game is, just from something like a studio working by themselves to produce it. Stardew Valley, one of the most popular games on the internet, made by one person. And so, you've got your farming simulators, they're right there, and it's just, there really is, there's really games for everybody, and you're absolutely right. Explore.
Absolutely. And I will say that indies, I think, excel in story-based games or story-driven games.
Absolutely.
Which can sometimes be overlooked in the AAA titles. Sometimes.
Yeah. Indies as a whole are allowed to take a lot more risks than published games and things like that, because frankly you've got the board and things like that breathing down your neck. Hey, we have to have this, we got to have loot boxes, we got to have microtransactions, things like that. Let's worry about those first, put those priorities first, and make sure that this game is making money, as opposed to making sure that the game is crafted with care. A lot of things like that are overlooked there, and it's really sad to see, because I know a lot of AAA developers, if they could, they would love to, do the things that indie games do, but they just can't. And so what's interesting is that a lot of these AAA studios are opening separate branches to put out and adopt indie games that they think are worth spotlighting. So you've got Fee, this game that's coming out. I saw EA is publishing.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and it looks like a great game. It looks like a game EA would never make. So I think that's great. I'm
step in the right direction.
But at the same time, we can't help forget that sometimes these companies can sort of siphon the creativity behind some of these games, with things like, release dates. Like, you got to make this date. I don't care if it's not finished. We got to make money on this because we can't keep it too long. And there's this connotation behind a lot of these publishers, Activision, EA specifically, about being all about money. And so when you see a game that's like beautiful and you're like, oh my gosh, this indie game, I'm so glad it got a publisher because it's going to get the marketing it needs. It's going to get, the things like that it deserves. But EA, I don't know. It makes you really apprehensive, and it's sad. It's sad to see, but hopefully we see more studios. I would love to see Nintendo start an indie developing, publishing situation like that. I would love to see them do that.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's a good business strategy to loosen some of the very demanding restrictions a lot of creators are put under. I don't think Google does this anymore, but a few years ago, they had a program where every Google employee, at least every programmer, had about an hour of the workday to work on any single personal project related to tech that they wanted to. And they had enormous strides in content, project development, creativity, etc., in an otherwise very, very strict business setting. And I think it's a useful model for game developers to adapt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting to see.
I'm very excited by it. I can't wait.
Yes,
I can't wait to play that game. I'm so it's really it really does warm my heart to see studios that are, going out on a limb and trying things out and seeing them being picked up and given the marketing that they need.
Absolutely. And more time always equals better product. Well, I shouldn't say that. Not always, but
no.
Did you ever watch True Detective, the TV show?
No. What is that?
Okay, it's a fantastic TV show written by a dude named Nick Pizzolatto, and the first season, one of the best things I have ever seen on television, universally loved. Then they rushed him for season 2, and we don't talk about season 2. It's just the saddest thing I've ever seen. Oh, star-studded cast, a really good writer behind it, and everybody universally watched that, stuck it out, and it was just like, Nick, why? Nick, no. Come back to us, Nick.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where's my next?
And the Get Good audience is like, why does he have this woman on?
I know, right? Talking about detective shows. We're here for games, damn it. Okay. So, what indie game, and I mean any indie game, I'm talking publishers, without publishers, or whatever, what indie game would you say has been the most influential to you?
I feel like this is a cliche, but given that I'm obsessed with the horror genre in any medium, I love the Outlast games. They were extraordinary, and they were indies designed by people with a AAA background, and it was extraordinary. It was so good. The second one, slightly less so than the first and the DLC, but we just ignore that.
Oh, man. I recently, it's actually a really recent game, that Golf Story on Nintendo Switch. It's like this little RPG game where you play golf, and you go around, you complete missions, and they're all golf based. Like you got regular golf, you got disc golf, and you got mini golf. Fuck the mini golf. I mean, who doesn't like mini golf?
I love mini golf,
right?
As you know.
And it took me back to all those like Mario Golf RPGs on the Game Boy. I
used to love those.
It was so charming, and I was like, you know what? This, like, I can't even remember how much it was. I think it was $15 on the eShop, and like it was while I was writing for this,
Mm-hmm.
and everything, and I was just like, holy shit. Why, like, why isn't this like $40 fucking, you know? And
Absolutely.
oh my, it is one of the most charming pieces of entertainment I've like had the pleasure of playing in such a long time. If you own a Switch, please go check it out. It's an amazing time.
I love that your recommendation is so sweet and touching and nostalgic, and
yours
mine
is fucking
involves
Outlast.
absolutely gory murder and death and trauma.
See, indies for everyone, people.
Exactly, even people like me, especially people like me.
Oh god, there are 2 people like you. There. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us. Where can we find you, my dear?
Yes, thank you for having me. And I am on YouTube as Persephonics. You can just go to youtube.com/c/Persephonics. I'm on Twitter as Persephonical, and on Instagram as Persephonicsgram, which I never use because I'm basically an 80-year-old woman. So unless you want to stare at cats, don't follow me on Instagram.
Wonderful. Thank you once again. I love having you on the show. Your insight is so insightful.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Just to let you guys know, we have a wonderful video with Persephonics, as well as Andrew from the Bombardiers, Eli from Molonner, and Peter from Rap the Turtle. I will never get over that fucking name. And we have a great time. Someone has to read erotic fan fiction. Go check it out.
Mm-hmm. And Lapo weeps that it's not who he wants it to be.
Oh, yeah. And go watch Rachael. She throws her balls around. You'll know what I'm talking about if you check out her channel. Just throwing balls.
I do throw a lot of balls around.
Oh.
I handle balls quite well.
Absolutely.
And Lapo's soul slowly dies as he has to do more editing.
Last one. I can't do this anymore. All right, everybody, go out there. Get good.